I'm going to start with quoting Maimonides, which you all have in the source sheets. Maimonides Yad HaChazok, it's on page 2. Maimonides Yad HaChazok, Laws of Chometz and Matzah, chapter 7, and number 1. It is a positive commandment of the Torah to relate the miracles and wonders that occurred to our ancestors in Egypt on the night of the 15th of Nisan. Let's stop there before we end this halacha, this law. Incidentally, if I say something in Hebrew, so I asked a few people to remind me immediately that I should explain everything and translate everything into English. Okay? So everyone is requested and invited to do so, because some may feel, well, I don't want to stop the rabbi in the middle and tell him that he should translate. But please do so. If I use a word in Hebrew, just say translation. How do you read this line that I just read? So normally, one would interpret it. This is the key line for the evening. One would interpret it that, I'll read it another way. On the 15th of Nisan, every single year, which is when we have Seder Night, there's a biblical obligation to retell the story of the Exodus. Okay? That's how it's normally understood. Is that correct? I mean, if you read it, it's incorrect. It's absolutely incorrect, and I'll show you that it's incorrect. It's absolutely incorrect. Why? Again, you're following with me? On the 15th of it's true that on the 15th of Nisan we are obligated to retell the story of the Exodus. But this first line is not telling you that. It's telling you something else. This first line should be read as follows. I'll say it out loud. On the 15th of Nisan, approximately 3,300 years ago, wonders happened. Wonders and miracles happened. You have to tell those wonders and miracles over on the 15th of Nisan every single year. Okay? Debbie is looking at me like I lost my mind. And I'm going to prove, this is the evening's job, to prove this. And when we prove it, we will have a new understanding of the Haggadah, and it'll be the formula for you. But I didn't say this. You know who said this? Reb Chaim Brisker said it. And how do I know that Reb Chaim Brisker said it? It's not written anywhere. Because my Rebbe, who was his grandson, the Rav Yosef Levi Soloveitchik, told it to us. That which miracles are we obligated to tell over on Seder Night? Are we obligated to tell over the story of the Exodus? And what is the story of the Exodus? What do you consider the story of the Exodus? It's a great question.
Is it
the 10 Makos?
Or is it the backstory?
Or is it the backstory from Joseph and his brothers?
From Abraham.
Or Avrohom? In Bris Bein Absarim?
What? Translate.
Excellent. From the covenant between the halves, which is mentioned, but it's not mentioned in the main part of the Maggid section. So I assume that you've gone through most of the source material, but I start first with the provocation. That's where to start. You start by provoking the people who thought, including myself, who thought they knew what the Maggid is, So you say, no, I did not know what Magid is, but now I know what it is, and I'm going to show, now I understand Magid, because I'm going to go through that God, you'll understand that this is the only interpretation. Again, normally we think that we're obligated to tell over the story of the Exodus. So, this is a very difficult thing to do because the Torah never says to do that. Never says it. Bring your pasuk says, tell over what transpired to you in Egypt. Doesn't say clearly that. Does not say it. But it does say the next verse that Maimonides look at Halacha Aleph, meaning Law 1. I started to read, and it says not the first verse that Maimonides quotes, which is absolutely a proof to what I just said, because I'm going to show you it's a proof. But the second verse, the line starts, it's the fourth line of that halacha, of that law, Law 1. And how do we know that this is on the night of the 15th? It is derived from what is said, and you should tell your child on that day, it is because of this that God took me out of Egypt. Doesn't even say that. It says, "Ba'avur zeh os Hashem li b'tseisi miMitzrayim." When I was leaving Egypt, God, because of this, God did for me when I was leaving Egypt. Okay? So it doesn't even say that you should retell the story of going out of Egypt. It says, the first part of what Maimonides says, now let's go through it again. It is a positive commandment, I'm starting again. It is a positive commandment of the Torah to relate the miracles and wonders that occurred to our ancestors in Egypt on the night of the 15th of Egypt, meaning in Egypt. And what happened on the night of the 15th, that is the only thing that you're biblically obligated to retell. Of course, as we will show, it would have very little meaning, or not the same meaning, not very little meaning, it would have great meaning. But it wouldn't have the same meaning unless we give some background, we furnish some background. So if you look for 1 second at Magid, page 3, I have the entire Magid section of the Haggadah divided into A, B, and C. I'm sure you saw that I divided into A, B, and C. Now, the A, what is that? The B, what is that? And what is the C? So, I'm going to explain what the A, B, and C are. They're doing not totally different things. They're working in tandem, but it's not. It seems from A. Why are we talking about Rabbi Eliezer discussing? Are we obligated? Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, am I obligated to mention every day of the year about going out of Egypt? What is it doing in the Haggadah? What is it doing in the Haggadah? And then the other parts we will go through in a second. But the A, B, and C, Maimonides is telling you what we have to do. Listen for 1 second. Let's go back to Maimonides Halacha Aleph, Law 1. It is a positive commandment to relate the miracles and wonders that occurred to our ancestors in Egypt on the night of the 15th of Nisan. Not that I'm obligated to tell that on the night of 15th of Nisan. So how do I know that? Maybe I'm wrong. Look at the next line. And how do we, the fourth line, and how do we know that this is on the night of the 15th? It is derived from what is said, and you shall tell your child on that day, it is because of this. So he brings a verse that says, that implies, and the Haggadah itself mentions this verse, and says that it should be on the 15th. So what is he talking about in the first three lines? When he says, as it says, he brings another verse. On the second line, he brings another verse. Remember, this day is the time you left Egypt. Why is he bringing that verse? If he's going to prove that we're obligated to say the story on the 15th every year, he does that on line 5, 6, 4 or 5. He brings a verse. So what is he bringing? Remember, this day is the time you left Egypt. And that verse makes no sense whatsoever. Why? Because if you look at Rashi and Chumash, so Rashi says correctly, and Maimonides will agree to that, that verse is talking about Zechira of each day. Translation: remembering the events that occurred in Egypt every single day. I left Egypt. God took me out of Egypt. Every day you're obligated to do it twice, in the morning and at night. Women don't have the same obligation because it's a time-bound mitzvah. You have other things which are very important to do. Apparently that transcends this time-bound obligations. But it's a good thing if you do it. But the point is that there is this verse has nothing to do with Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, which we do on the 15th. So why is the Rambam quoting this verse? That's the obligation that's a separate obligation of remembering going out of Egypt each night and each day of the entire year. What does it have to do with what we're talking about here? If we have time, I will explain to you how these two biblical obligations dovetail. Because if you look in Maimonides, when he counts the mitzvos, the 613 mitzvahs, and if you look at the Sefer HaChinuch, that he counts the mitzvahs, you will not find the mitzvah of remembering going out of Egypt every single day. You won't find it. We know it's a biblical commandment, but you won't find it in the 613. So it's something to wonder about. Hopefully I'll have time to explain that also. It'll come out from what we're saying very clearly, but let's, why it's absolutely a biblical mitzvah, but it is not counted as one of the 613. But does everyone understand, or is my decibel level clouding the point? You know, sometimes I yell so loud, so it's not to cloud the point, it's trying to make it clear. Does everyone understand that Maimonides is quoting two verses for seemingly the same thing, and what is he doing? But according to what we just said, it's clear as crystal. The first verse is not telling you that you have an obligation to say over the story on the 15th at night. The first verse cues you in, focuses you in. When you're remembering that you went out of Egypt, that other mitzvah that we know is there, but it's not counted, which is ancillary. Oh, I wouldn't say ancillary. It is another part of this remembering. On 15th at night, we give a full-blown discussion. Every day of the year, we just have to mention that we went out, right? But for sure, it is talking about the same item, meaning what to remember and what do we retell. Retell is a longer way, saying it over in a lengthy manner. Remembering is just remembering. And it doesn't mean in your mind. You have to articulate it. That's an oral tradition from Sinai. So what do you say? Oh, bepeh is with the mouth. You have to articulate it verbally. Okay? So, would you say these two mitzvahs, commandments, but they're both together, they're sister mitzvahs. One is to tell the story on the 15th. That's the Davar Pasha. That's simple, that it's the same. The essence of what you're retelling and remembering is the same, right? Oh! So, he brings a proof. He brings a proof from a verse. Remember this day as the time you left Egypt. So what are you supposed to remember? This day. Not the whole story of the Exodus, because we don't know what that story is. I mean, where does it start? Where does it end? Is it start at the back end, like you said, Debbie said? You start from Avrohom Avinu, from Abraham, the patriarch? No. It's remember this day as the time you left Egypt. That's what you have to remember. Are we all together on this? The substance of what you're remembering and what you're retelling is taught to us by this sister commandment of remembering going out of Egypt. No, the day, this day that you left. That's the only thing you're supposed to remember. Now, I didn't say this. Reb Chaim said, no, the proof I said. The Rav did not say this proof. He had a whole, the Rav means, my Rebbe, Rav Salvation, was called the Rav. The Rav means rabbi, the teacher. And indeed, everything that I know how to think about in learning is from him. So he was a very, very great man in learning. Very, very great. So he said this, but everything I'm saying now is not from him. It took me decades to work this out. He didn't say anything more than this. Reb Chaim said, his grandfather, said, this is who was arguably the greatest Talmudist in the last 150 years, said that Maimonides means that the substance of what you have to retell on the 15th is what happened on the 15th at night in Egypt 3,300 years ago. And the proof that Maimonides says this is nothing to talk about. Because it says, remember this day is the time you left Egypt. And then Maimonides says something incredible to prove this. Otherwise you can't understand what Maimonides is talking about. In the same way as it says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. This is like you want to fall on the floor and say, what is he talking about? He's trying to explain Sipu Yosiyas Mitzrayim. Translation. I'm saying this now, but you should remember this. That you can remember. Sipu, the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim going out of Egypt, according to what we're saying, this story is that night that we actually ate the Passover lamb, that God killed the firstborn and took us out physically from Egypt. Okay? Are we together on this? Okay. So now we understand what he's quoting, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Because Zochos Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho, which is the Hebrew of remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. So what are you going to remember on Shabbos? What are you going to remember when you're remembering on Shabbos? What are you going to remember? Wednesday? What are you going to remember on Shabbos when you want to sanctify Shabbos? You're going to remember Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday. You remember Shabbos. That's it. And you think I'm yelling. You should hear the Rav yelling when he was 60 and 70. Okay?
You also remember Mitzrayim on Shabbos.
You also remember, right? Mitzrayim we remember all the time. That's separate. But you hear this, Debbie? Okay. Is the point made? Now that the Rambam has proven that from the sister mitzvah, he's proven that the substance of what you have to remember and retell is the night, the day. We're going to explain. It means the night. You'll see in a second that, but the day and night. I'll explain it. in a few minutes. So remember this, it means that night that we ate the Paschal lamb and God killed the firstborn, and I'll explain what that means, and then I'll actually dovetail it with what I wrote in the Haggadah. But I didn't know all this when I wrote the Haggadah. Okay, I wrote my commentary on the Haggadah. So, after we know that, so then we have a question. So when indeed do we have to retell this story? It was a process, the going out of Egypt. And when are we obligated to start retelling this story? So the Haggadah says maybe we should start retelling it from Rosh Chodesh, and I'll explain what that means. Maybe we should begin to say the miracles that happened to us, that God performed on the 15th at night. Perhaps we can even start retelling it on the first of the month. Why? Because that's when God told us that He's taking us out. Establish the month, because that's the day we were told to establish the months. We were giving our first mitzvah, our first commandment, and we are then instructed in the Torah to take a lamb, and we're going to take a lamb from the 10th, and we're going to slaughter the lamb, and all the laws of chametz, of leavening, and matzah, they're all told to us from that time. So maybe that's when we should start, or can accomplish. We can accomplish our obligation. In other words, we can do it. The Talmud is suggesting, as we have, incidentally, when we're talking about the Haggadah, we're talking about a piece of Talmud. We're talking about a piece of Talmud. I'll show you. It's a piece of Talmud. It's as if you were learning Talmud. Okay, it is actually a piece of. It was written by the people who wrote the Talmud. The sages mentioned in the Haggadah are the sages of the Talmud. It was put together by the sages of the Talmud. Of course, it was put together many years before, already from Moses. But it was redacted by the Chachmei HaTalmud, and I don't know exactly when, but it was after the Tanoim, because Tanoim are mentioned, the first or second level of Talmud sages that we know about. So it means to say that maybe we could start retelling what happened on the 15th from the time that God told us that something big is going to happen. He's going to take us out. Okay. So the verses, the verses you have a little bit. We're a little bit at home with the verses. How Maimonides constructs the verses. Eugene, it was so far clear. Okay. Now, it's interesting. I want to look at the verse, the second verse. The second verse is telling us not the substance of what. It's not the substance of what we're going to retell or remember. But the second verse is telling us when. So, the Talmud, through the mention in the Haggadah and also in the Talmud, it says that you're going to tell it over on the night of the 15th. Not from Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of the month, and not from when you sacrifice the Paschal lamb, which is the eve, the afternoon before the night of the 15th. But you're going to tell it on the 15th at night. Why? Bavur zeh, because you point, the verse seems to say you point to the matzah and the maror that is in front of you. Bavur said, because of this. What is this? It's a pronoun. What is it referring to? It refers, if you look at the text of the Bible, of that verse, it's referring that we just were commanded to eat the matzah and the maror, right? So it says, when but you tell your children, because of this, the matzah and maror, God took us out of Egypt. That's what the verse literally means. Okay? So we have to understand this. And it's not only the matzah and the maror. I'm going to say something which I'm taking license. But it doesn't mean just the matzah and the maror. It means in that time when it was said, it refers to one other thing that we had. And what is that? The Pesach, the Paschal Lamb. Because of course they had the Paschal Lamb. That's what the verses there are referring to. They had the matzah and maror, and they had the Paschal Lamb. Okay, so perhaps, I'd say it's a license, because we have in the tradition, we have only bavur zeh because of this. Bishor sheitz matzah maror munachim fanecha. Only when you have matzah and maror in front of you. Okay, there's a reason for that. The reason for that is as follows. Were the Jews going to have the Paschal Lamb all their generations? No, we don't have the Paschal Lamb now. You're still obligated to say the story, to retell the story. So the Gemara, the Talmud, is very clear in not mentioning the Paschal Lamb. Of course it includes the Paschal Lambs. That's simple. That's avada, which is a Yiddish term for sure. For sure you're obligated to mention that it includes the Paschal Lamb. When you have, you're obligated to tell, when you have the 15th at night, you're obligated to tell the story of what happened on the 15th in Egypt, when you have the Paschal Lamb and the matzah and the maror. But why does it only mention the matzah and maror? It should say when you have Pesach matzah and maror. The answer is because for all the generations we weren't going to have the Paschal Lamb. We were going to bitter exile. And most of our history has been in exile. You're obligated to tell the story of going out of Egypt. And that's why it's very clear that the Talmud only mentions that. One should not have a thought that there's no obligation when there's not Pesach as well. Garen, you got me? Or shall I say it again? You got it? Okay. So, we did the verses, but it seems a little strange. What happened? What was so special that happened on the 15th at night? Reb Chaim is saying this, and the Rambam is absolutely saying it. Reb Chaim says it in the Rambam, in Maimonides. It's absolutely clear, it's clear as crystal, that it means that with the substance of what you have to say over in discussing the Exodus is specifically what happened on the 15th at night in Egypt. Why? So before I answer that, and obviously that's a very important why, let me show you something that Maimonides says later on. Okay. Thank God that I bolded it so I could find it quickly. And it's on page 3. On page 3, 4 lines down. 4 lines down, page 3, 4 lines down. He likewise begins by teaching that we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and all the evil that he caused us, and he concludes with the miracles and wonders that were performed for us and with our freedom. So first of all, the miracles and wonders that were performed from us and with our freedom. And this means, you see the next line? And this means that he should delve, meaning every Jew, he should delve into the exegesis. The exegesis, what is exegesis? Can someone tell me, what's exegesis? I mean, if you didn't learn Talmud, you don't know what the word exegesis means. Some people do know, but you definitely know what it means if you learn Talmud. Exegesis means to analyze, to rip apart a verse, and from that ripping apart, delve into what the verse is saying. You would not have that line of explanation in Webster's dictionary, but that's what it means, right? That's what it means. So, and this means that he should delve into the exegesis of the text of the Bible, from a wandering Aramean was my father, until the conclusion of that section. So, what is that? And look at the next line. And anyone who adds and lengthens the exegesis of this section is worthy of praise. So when the Talmud says in the Haggadah, V'chol hamarbe l'sape b'yisiyas Yisayim harei ze meshubach, and anyone who gives a lengthy discussion of V'chol hamarbe of going out of Egypt, it is very praiseworthy. So what is it referring to? Maimonides says explicitly, it's talking about anyone who delves into these verses from a wandering Aramean was my father. That is the Haggadah, according to the Maimonides. That is the focus of the Haggadah. Everything else is either A, background material for that, that's A. B, is what the guts is, Arami Ovidovi, a wandering Aramean, or the other translations of what it means. That's what the Maimonides says. And C is thanks, praise for what God did to us, for us. So the Maimonides says clearly, the Cholamar Belisape B'Yisiyas Yisayim. So what the Talmud uses the phrase, the Cholamar Belisape B'Yisiyas Yisayim. Anyone who goes at length into the exegesis of the verses, anyone who goes into length to the story of our going out of Egypt, it's praiseworthy. It's referring to these verses, the exegesis of these verses. You know how many verses there are? How many verses are we talking about? So the Haggadah has how many verses? 4. We're talking about that is the Haggadah. The exegesis of 4 verses. That is what the story we're supposed to tell. Okay? Now, he says, the Maimonides says of this section until the conclusion of that section, so he means the whole conclusion of that section, but still the Haggadah, I'll explain that too. What are we talking about here? 743. Okay. What had happened in those? What does the Haggadah tell us in the exposition, the exegesis of those 4 verses? Okay, so let's look at those 4 verses. Section B. Let's look at those 4 verses. Verse 1. Okay, so verse 1, an Aramean wished to destroy my father, and he went down to Egypt and sojourned there. few in number, and he became there a nation great and mighty and numerous. Okay, so that is definitely background material. It's not just that, that's not just what happened on the 15th. That's background material. But it's only meant as background material, as we will see in a second. And then we have verse 2, also background material. The Egyptians treated us badly, and they made us suffer, and they put hard work upon us. That's background material. And then verse 3, and we cried out to the Lord, the God of our fathers, and the Lord heard our voice and saw our suffering, our labor, and our oppressions. That's also what happened. Now verse 4. Verse 4, we're supposed to remember going out of Egypt. So we have to look at what the Torah and the Talmud call going out of Egypt. That term, right? What is going out of Egypt? We're dying to find out what that term is. So we have to find out what does it mean going out of Egypt. So the 4th verse says, the Lord took us out of Egypt. Does it say those words? That's what we're supposed to remember. The Lord took us out of Egypt. What does it mean took us out of Egypt? It's not the first 3 verses. He took us out of Egypt with a strong hand and an outstretched arm and with great manifestation and with signs and with wonders. Okay. So, what is that referring to? Well, signs, wonders, a strong hand, outstretched arm. So what is that talking about? Maybe it's talking about the Esamakos, the 10 plagues. Not through an angel, not through a servant, not through a messenger. If it's talking about the whole story of the plagues, etc., didn't you learn the Bible? What's wrong with these Talmudists? Didn't they see the Bible? Moses! What was Moses? Moses was not a messenger. God argued with him for a week. We have that tradition. To become the messenger to lead the Jewish people out of Egypt. So what do you mean? Lord took us out of Egypt. Not through an angel, not through a servant, not through a messenger. Took us out of Egypt. That's what we have to say over. Took us out. Yetzias Messiah. That is what we have to say over. Not through a messenger, not through a seraph, not through an angel. The Holy One, blessed is He, did it in His glory by Himself. Thus it is said, in that night I will pass through the land of Egypt, and I will smite every firstborn in the land of Egypt, from man to beast, and I will carry out judgments against all the gods of Egypt, and I, the Lord, I will pass through the land of Egypt, I am not an angel, I will smite every firstborn in the land of Egypt, I am not a servant, and I will carry out judgments against all the gods of Egypt, I am not a messenger, I, the Lord, it is I and none other. It's referring only, going out of Egypt, is referring only to the 10th plague, Makas Bechoros. Who was the one who orchestrated the 10th plague? Only God. And that's going out of Egypt. Going out of Egypt is the 10th plague, what happened at. So, Isaac, give me 1 minute. Give me 1 minute. I am sorry to be so heavy-handed, but it says with a strong hand.
That was God, not you.
What?
That was God.
Yeah.
You're not God.
But, you try to emulate. No, give me 2 minutes, please. With a strong hand. This refers to the devil. And now the exegesis comes along. Every word in this verse is now going to be analyzed. It says God took us out of Egypt. Okay, so we got to know what is this referring to. So the first thing it says, the Talmud is saying, meaning the Agada, we have 5 things that the verse says. Biad chazaka, strong hand. Zo in the tuya, and with an outstretched arm. And then it says, what does it say? Moragado. With great manifestation means God revealed Himself. Osos, signs. Movsim is wonders. So God took us out with that. What is took out mean? What does took out mean? Took out means Makas Bechoros. We're talking about mathematics here. Mathematics, the logic of the Talmud. This is the tradition that we have from Sinai. This is it. Maimonides is giving to us. That God is giving it to us. What is Vayotziei Hashem? God took us out of Egypt with how many ways? Not through Moses. Moses doesn't count, even though Moses is a big guy, but he's not mentioned in Haggadah. So now it's not mentioned in Haggadah, but of course he's not mentioned in Haggadah because he has nothing to do with the story of going out of Egypt. Going out of Egypt has to do with the 15th of night. Moses was not a player on the 15th of night. Had nothing to do on the 15th of night, at night of Nisan. Only God. We will explain why. You missed some important stuff. But okay. All right. You'll pick it up. You're quite good. So, these 5 things I'm suggesting are referring to what? That night of the 15th only. Oh, so this is, I'm sure a few of them, if you were thinking, Rabbi Kahn, you don't know what you're talking about. Look at the first exegesis with a strong hand. This refers to the dever, pestilence. As it says, behold, the hand of the Lord will be upon your livestock in the field, upon the horses, the donkeys, the camels, the herds, and the flocks, a very severe pestilence. That was one of the 10 plagues, pestilence. It's not the 15th at night. Rabbi, your whole sermon, your whole lecture is nothing with nothing. Those guys don't know what they're talking about. Of course Rabbi Kahn knows what we're talking about because that's what Rabbi Chaim says, that the Rambam says, and that's what Haggadah says. Because look at the next piece. And with an outstretched arm. What does it say that's referring to? Sword. Anyone knows of a makkah that had sword in it? No. Only, hold a second, we're going to have to prove that. We're proving that. So, the sword, nothing, there's no makkah that mentions sword. No makkah, no medrash, no gemara, no nothing that of sword. Nothing. So it's not referring to the makkahs, the first 9 makkahs. And then, with great manifestation. The great manifestation is definitely, what is it that referring to? Look, this refers to the revelation of the Shekhinah. As it says, has any God ever tried to take for himself a nation from the midst of another nation? With trials, signs, and wonders. With war, and with a strong hand and an outstretched arm, and with great manifestations like all the Lord your God did for you in Egypt before your eyes. When did the Lord your God do for you with divine revelation? You just read it. It was that 15th at night. That's when he did it. Not the other times. There were miracles. But that's not called divine revelation. There's a logic of the Talmud. There's a very precise way of speaking. So when it says divine revelation, there was no divine revelation. There were great miracles. There was no divine revelation in the first 9 makkos, in the first 9 plagues. But when was the divine revelation? In the 10th plague. 10th plague had divine revelation. Only divine revelation, because Moses was not involved. There was not even an angel involved. It was only God. And this says it because when did God? Now I'm letting the cat out of the bag. That's why he asked. I'm letting the cat out of the bag. This is the sentence that'll let the cat out of the bag. Why is Makas Bechoros the pivotal point? Makas Bechoros is the pivotal point because in Makas Bechoros, God took one nation from another nation. What does that mean? You ever hear the chosen people? You know who the chosen people are? That's us. We're the chosen people. And if you really buy into it, it's a very, very wonderful thing to be chosen. Not so easy sometimes, but it's a magnificent thing to be chosen. You know when God chose us? When he took one nation from another nation. He said to the whole world, I'm taking these people. These are my people. These are my people. And I'm not doing it through agency. I'm not doing it through emotion. No, 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 no. And I'm not doing it through any miracles besides myself, by the divine revelation. It's my choice. Only my choice. No one should ever think that God chose any other. God chose the Jewish people. It's a very beautiful thought. And guess why? That this is an obligation, the only obligation to tell our children. You know why? Because what are we supposed to tell them? We tell them, you're obligated in this, you're obligated in that, you're obligated in this. Yes, we're rabbinically obligated to instruct them in all the mitzvahs. But the biblical obligation, you tell your child that you were chosen to be God's people. You, my son, were chosen. My father told me that I was chosen. When you have that in your gut, there's a different imperative. There's a different imperative going through life. That's what we have to remember. That's why Pesach night is so critical. That's why, whether they understand it or not, most people keep Pesach. They don't even understand it, but their soul understands it. That we keep Pesach because that night we were chosen to be God's people. And God did the choosing. And that's what we have to tell them. Because it's that 15th, that's what happened on the 15th. God, as it says in the verse, has any God ever tried to take for himself a nation from the midst of another nation, with trials, signs, and wonders, with war and with a strong hand, and an outstretched arm, and with great manifestations, like all that God, your Lord, your God, did for you in Egypt before your eyes? This is talking about the 15th night. That's the essence of going out of Egypt. And if you'll ask me, it says this with a strong hand. If you'll ask me, it says with a strong hand. So that says pestilence. Pestilence was one of the makos. You don't know what you're talking about. Because there was pestilence that God caused. He killed the firstborn of Egypt with 5 ways. There were 5 ways he killed them. I don't know whether some he killed with this and some he killed with this, or they all were killed with an amalgam of these 5 ways, but it means this is how God killed them. And the dever, the pestilence, so someone who wrote a Haggadah 19 years ago, that's me, and put in brackets that pestilence, the plague of pestilence, he didn't know what he was talking about then. That's an incorrect translation because it's nothing to do with it just is a proof, again, exegesis. We're trying to understand with a strong hand, what does it mean? What does it mean? What does hand refer to when the Torah used? This is right up, Robin's alley. She tries something, right? It means that with the hand refers to pestilence. So God, in this case, when it says with a strong hand, when God's hand, the allusion to hand of God, means that he killed the firstborn with pestilence. He killed him with sword, because we don't sign sword by any place else. The great manifestation, there's definitely no Gili Shechina, no divine revelation except for Makas Bechoros, as we just saw before in the previous paragraph. And with signs, this refers to the staff. It's not talking about the staff of Moses. It's I don't know what the staff is. I don't know. Don't take it. I'm not so knowledgeable. But it had to do with God either beating, somehow causing the first one to be beaten by the staff. And wonder also, I don't know exactly, but it's definitely not referring to the Makkah of Dam. It's all referring to. It's all referring only to God killing the firstborn of Egypt these 5 ways. Now, I'll prove it to you. We have very little time left, so I'm going to prove it to you quickly. I'm going to ask those who learned in yeshiva to tell me when it says Dova Acher in the Gemara, when the Talmud says Davacha, another explanation. What does it mean? It means another explanation which does not agree with the first explanation. You understand what I'm saying? Does not agree with the first explanation. That's what it means. The entire Talmud, there's no other meaning. You understand? So, when it says another explanation, let's look at the other explanation, and perhaps that will shed light on what we have just read and proven. Another explanation. Strong hand, these 5 statements of this verse mean the following. It's not referring to what you say. It's referring, strong hand is 2. Strong hand is 2 words. It indicates 2 plagues. Outstretched arm, another 2. It's 2 words. It's another 2. It refers to 2 plagues. Great manifestations, also 2 words. It refers to the two plagues. And signs is in the plural. It refers to 2 plagues. And wonders is also in the Hebrew plural, so it refers to 2 plagues. What does this mean? So we have 5 times 2. We all know that's 10. So these are the 10 plagues which the Holy One, blessed is He, brought upon the Egyptians. Namely, as follows: blood, frogs, lice, wild beasts, pestilence, boils, hail, locusts, darkness, slaying of the firstborn. So what did the first person, who is the first thought, the first opinion, what did he think this is? What was he saying? Now you understand it. He said that this is not referring to the plagues. That's the second opinion. The first opinion is saying that it's referring only to what transpired in the killing of the firstborn, because that was when we went out of Egypt. In quotes, that's what the Torah means when we went out of Egypt, when God took us out from another nation. L'cheiru solam. I don't want to go into what Chaim says on l'cheiru solam. I don't have to translate either, because I'm not going into it. Okay. So, you hear what I'm saying? This is incontrovertible. It's a different Haggadah. Ralph is a different Haggadah. It's incontrovertible what I'm saying. Now, you understand the next... You understand? I could go through the whole Haggadah with this, but let me just go there. Rabbi Yehuda refers to them by acronyms. He refers to the 10 plagues by acronyms. So when they were little kids, from the time we were little kids, we understood that no one understands what Rabbi Yehuda is talking about. He's referred to acronyms. So what is happening here that he refers to acronyms? Oh, but according to what we're saying, it's beautiful. Rabbi Yehuda rejects the second opinion that refers to the 10 plagues. But he says, now here are the 2 possibilities. I'm giving you 2 possibilities. He really sides with the first opinion, meaning that it refers. So he says, if I mention the 10 plagues, I'm in very deep water, because that means that I'm sort of taking away from the focus, which is what Torah tells me to do. Talk about Makas Bechoros, the killing of the firstborn. So he says, but I want to give background. I want to speak about other wonders. He said in an acronym. Okay? Okay. Now. Oh, thanks, man. You know, this is a workout. Tonight I got to work out. And I didn't forget that you wanted to ask a question. We'll leave a few minutes for questions, then you're the first one. So now, then we have the next situation, the next, idea in the Haggadah. Rav Yossi the Galilean said, and 10 plagues in Egypt, and there was a hand over the splitting of the sea. So 10 times 5 is 50. And then Rabbi Eliezer says that each plague in Egypt was 4. So that means 40 plagues total, and times 5 on the Red Sea is 200. And Rabbi Akiva comes along and says, hey, you know what? That in Egypt, each plague was 5. And then, so that means each plague was 5, so that means 50 in Egypt, and then 250 on the Red Sea. Okay. What is this? This is very nice, midrashic. What does that? What does the splitting a sea have to do here? We just. It's very difficult. Very difficult. The positioning of this here. Oh, but now we can all sing and dance. It makes tremendous sense. Just making sense. It's phenomenal. Phenomenal. You know what's so phenomenal? The second opinion says that the verse of going out of Egypt is not referring to just the killing of the firstborn. It's referring to 10 plagues. Because I have a big problem with the way you say it. You're saying that the killing of the firstborn was done through how many ways? 5. I don't see any other plague having 5 components, 5 parts. So the Haggadah says every plague was 5, according to Rabbi Kiva. And according to Rabbi Lezer, it's 4. Don't think that this was unique. You have a problem with accepting that this last verse, is a discussion of only the last plague. That going out of Egypt is only referring to the last plague because you say it's 5 components. Don't worry about it. Every single plague was 5 components, and that's exactly why this is brought in here. Now I want to tell you, I have very little time left. This is, you should know, I covered the main ideas. I did, but I do, you know, you always think that you're going to cover, either you think that I don't have enough material, I don't know, but here I knew because I already discussed it a few times. I know I have enough material for many hours, but I thought I would get through more. But let me, I don't cover the main thing. I want to just now, those who are acquainted with Chumash and Rashi, so I'm going to knock your socks off now. Oh, this is for you. Please come in because I'm going to knock your socks off. Okay. So Moses does something seemingly very naughty because he's told by God, you're going to be the leader that I'm selecting, and 7 days they have it out, and we don't know all the Kabbalistic meaning of the 7 days. 7 days, God is arguing with Moses, you have to go. And Moses says, I'm not the man, I'm nothing, and the people, my brother's more worthy, I'm not the man. And God says, you know what? You're going. So he goes to his father-in-law and says, I'm going to Egypt. He doesn't tell him why. He says, I have to return. I have to return to Egypt. So, God appears to him once more. God appears to Moses once more. And let me go through that with you. So I didn't bring the verses. I did bring the verses. I'm sorry, that's what I meant to say. That was the first verses. Look at the page 2. Oh, I did bring the verses, okay. So, the first source, Exodus chapter 4, verse 22 to 23. And you shall say to Pharaoh, so said the Lord, my firstborn son is Israel. And you should say to Pharaoh, when you hear that his heart is hard, and he refuses to send the Israelites, say thus to him. It's pretty clear. God said he's going to have a hard heart. So this is what you're going to tell him. This is what you're going to tell him. Moses, you're my messenger. This is what you're going to tell him. So I say to you, verse 23. So I say to you, send out my son. Who is God's son?
Israel.
Israel. Exactly correct. It means we're going to be the chosen people, so that he will worship me. But if you refuse to send him out, behold, I am going to slay your firstborn son. Okay? So God lets the cat out of the bag that, Pharaoh, you don't want to send out the Jews. I'm telling you, I'm going to kill your firstborn. So, okay. So this is, and Rashi here, I bring down Rashi, that normally you conceal your secret weapons, But here, God doesn't have to worry about concealing his secret weapons. He tells the worst that can happen because he's not afraid that anyone can overpower him. So he says right away, the last makkah, the last plague. Now we go to Exodus chapter 5, verses 1 through 3. And afterwards Moses and Aaron came and said to Pharaoh, "So said the Lord God of Israel, send out my people and let them sacrifice to me in the desert." Okay? And afterwards Moses and Aaron came. But the elders slipped away one by one from following Moses and Aaron until they had all slipped away before they arrived at the palace. Yeah, it was a tough situation because you could be killed, you know. So they did so because they were afraid to go. And at Sinai he punished them. Okay, that's Rashi. And Pharaoh said, next verse 2, and Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord that I should heed his voice to let Israel out? I do not know the Lord, neither will I let Israel out." And they said, meaning Moses and Aaron said to Pharaoh, "The God of the Hebrews has happened upon us. Now let us go on a 3-day journey in the desert and sacrifice to the Lord our God, lest he strike us with a plague or with the sword." So Moses is told to tell Pharaoh what? No, incidentally, I have to explain something. Rashi, look at Rashi. Lest he strike us. So they're talking about themselves. No, they're not talking about themselves. Lest he strike us. They should have said, lest he strike you. Meaning, Moses should have said, lest God strike you, Pharaoh. But they imparted honor to the throne and out of respect said this. The word denotes a fatal encounter. Okay, no. But it means that Rashi's saying this is a way of speech in both the Bible and the Talmud, that if you want to act in a courteous way, of course you tell a person God is going to kill you, it can't be too courteous, but the point is you say it that it's going to come upon me, but it's understood that it's going to come upon them. So, but what did God say to tell Pharaoh? What was Moses instructed to tell Pharaoh? We read it before in verse.
To release his son.
And if they won't release the son,
He'll kill your firstborn.
Will kill the firstborn. Where did he mention killing the firstborn? He doesn't say that. He says, Moses says, lest he strike you, and I'll use the word you because it's just meaning you, Pharaoh, with a plague or with the sword. He's not saying anything about Makas Bechoros. Of course he is. What did we just see? Go to page 5. What is the first two components of Makas Bechoros? Strong hand is pestilence. What's the second one? Is sword. What does he say to Pharaoh? He says, with a plague or with the sword. That's exactly Makas Bechoros. I think I once wrote this to you. But you hear this? Not bad. What? Not bad. When you see something like this, you have to start believing. It's something unbelievable. Torah in general is so sweet and so inspiring. You know, but when I get excited here, it's not. I get excited when I'm talking to my children about Torah. This is it. You start to yell and scream. You're so excited. You know, when I grew up. I remember Haight-Ashbury pretty well. So, I remember the whole hippie movement. I remember when people started taking, drugs. It didn't. I mean, people started taking drugs many thousands of years ago. But I'm talking about the whole movement. And I was thinking, they can't get high. They don't know what high is. You want to get high? Learn Torah. I saw people get high on Torah. High. It's unbelievable. This is how to get high on Torah. You see what this verse says? The verse itself. Otherwise, you don't understand the verses. God tells him. God tells Moses, tell Pharaoh that you're going to have. I'm going to kill your firstborn, and he doesn't say that. No, he does say that. He tells him about the firstborn. That is how God is going to kill him with pestilence, plague, pestilence, and the sword. That's the first two components. This is unbelievable. This is unbelievable. This is unbelievable. Okay, I am afraid that we ran out of time. I don't want to allow, because Isaac is never going to forgive me, and I want to be his friend, and I don't want to lose that friendship. So please.
So I forgot what I was. No, I'm drawing a blank on this. I'm sure I was taught this, quite a bit of times in school. What was the specific event that transpired that all of a sudden the Jews in Egypt, boom, you have to become a slave? Was it because of the new Paro?
No, there was not. It was not it was a planned process that Pharaoh owned. This is an unbelievable thing. It's an unbelievable thing, and this could be an entire class by itself. But let me answer in 30 seconds. Way in. It was a process. Pharaoh saw that the Jews were unbelievable. They were extremely fruitful. Now they're going to take over.
The new Paro.
No, it doesn't have to be the new Paro, old Paro. It's just Paro. Let's not go on that with the new Paro. Asher lo yoda es Yosef. That didn't. It says in the verse that didn't know Yosef, but it could be it's an old Paro who suddenly doesn't know. The Jews are very powerful. They're very bright and capable. What's going to happen? The indigenous population, these people are like cockroaches reproducing. We reproduced in Egypt. So what's going to happen to us? We're going to become chopped liver. They're going to take over, and so we will cause them to come into slavery. You know how? The Jews have they want to help out. They always want to be more patriotic than anyone else. So I'll go, Pharaoh says, and I'll start building and digging trenches and building buildings, and they'll all come because they're the pharaohs. I'm going to invite everyone. But the second day, I'll come again for a shorter time. The third day, I won't come again. And the fourth day, we'll have Egyptians over them, and they'll go into slavery. There was only one tribe of the 12 tribes that did not did not follow what Pharaoh said. That was Levi, and they were never enslaved. We have by tradition they were never enslaved. And that's why Moses and Aaron were able to go to Pharaoh with impunity. Because they were never enslaved. It's like a wild thing. But anyway, this is basically the answer. So we're going to daven Ma'ariv now. I thank you all for coming. Incidentally, some of these ideas are in a very good Haggadah, the Chosen Nation Haggadah, by the way, which I even have brought along. If anyone wants to buy it, we have a special price. Incidentally, you think it's like believe me, we didn't do this thing to sell the Haggadahs, but the Chavetz Chaim used to peddle his Sfarim. He used to write about how it's bound and the print is good and the people should buy. I saw the letters. It's unbelievable. So if the Chavetz Chaim could peddle, I could also peddle, So anyway, you should know that many of the ideas that we mentioned tonight are included in Chosen Nation Haggadah, and you get it at a special price here. And if you'd like to buy it, if fine. If not, I want to wish you a wonderful Pesach, you and your families, and we should see each other, many times in happiness and health, and we should be together learning Torah. All the best, and thank you so much for coming. Thank you.